The crisp sea air of Mustique, a playground for the ultra-rich, usually tasted of salt and freedom. But for billionaire financier Jason Hawthorne, it was about to taste of ash. He'd brought his mistress, the impossibly beautiful and ambitious Anastasia, to his private villa, a gilded cache nestled on this exclusive island. He thought he had everything under control, his empire, his image, his women. But as the Caribbean sun rose on what he believed would be another day in paradise, a single devastating email would ignite a firestorm. Back in New York, his wife, the elegant and dangerously intelligent Callie, had just made a call. And with that one call, Jason Hawthorne, the king of his own universe, was about to discover that hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, especially one who knows the password to every offshore account. The Gulf Stream G650 descended towards Mustique with the silent grace of a predator. Below the Caribbean Sea was a dazzling tapestry of sapphire and turquoise, dotted with the emerald green of the Grenadine Islands. Jason Hawthorne, a man whose net worth was as vast and fluid as the ocean beneath him, barely glanced at the spectacle. His attention was consumed by the woman beside him. Anastasia Dubois was a masterpiece of genetics and ambition. Her hair, the color of dark honey, cascaded over the creamy leather of the jet seat. Her eyes, a startling shade of emerald, held a practiced innocence that belied a mind as sharp as a shard of glass. She was 24, a former art gallery assistant, who now curated a life of unimaginable luxury courtesy of Jason. "It's even more beautiful than you described, Jules," she murmured, her fingers tracing the condensation on her champagne flute. The diamond bracelet on her wrist, a casual gift from a recent trip to Antwerp, glittered with a cold fire. "The best for you, my love, Jason," replied his voice, a low rumble of satisfaction. At 52, he was still a formidable presence. His hair was more silver than black now, but his physique was honed by years of disciplined workouts with a former Mossad agent turned personal trainer. He had the kind of ruthless charm that made people feel privileged to be in his orbit, even as he was exploiting them. The private airstrip on Mustique was a sliver of asphalt carved into the lush landscape. As they disembarked, the humid air, thick with the scent of frangipane and salt, enveloped them. A custom-built electric golf cart, emblazoned with the crest of their villa, Serenity's End, was waiting. Jason had purchased the sprawling 10-acre estate a decade ago, not just as a vacation home, but as a tangible symbol of his ascent. It was his fortress of solitude, his playground, and now the stage for his latest indiscretion. Serenity's End was a marvel of modern architecture, a series of interconnected glass and teak pavilions that seemed to float above the turquoise water. An infinity pool bled into the horizon, and a private white sand beach sloped gently down to a secluded cove. The staff, a discreet team of locals who knew the value of silence, greeted them with cool towels and rum punch. For the rest of the day, Jason played the part of the magnanimous host. He and Anastasia swam in the warm sea, snorkeled among the coral reefs, and feasted on lobster and mango salad prepared by their private chef. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery strokes of orange and purple, they sat on the veranda. The silence broken only by the gentle lapping of the waves and the clinking of their glasses. "To us," Jason said, raising his glass of vintage Dom Perignon. To us, Anastasia echoed, her eyes shimmering in the candlelight. But as she leaned in to kiss him, her gaze flickered for a fraction of a second towards the mainland, a dark, distant shape on the horizon. It was a fleeting, almost imperceptible movement, but it was there, a shadow in paradise. Meanwhile, 6,000 miles away in the heart of Manhattan, Callie Hawthorne was seated in the library of their Park Avenue penthouse. The room lined with first editions and priceless art was her sanctuary. Unlike Anastasia's youthful allure, Callie possessed a timeless elegance, a beauty that had been sharpened, not softened by time. At 48, she was a formidable woman in her own right, a former international lawyer who had sacrificed her career to raise their 2 children and manage the intricate social and philanthropic machinery that underpinned Jason's empire. She had always known about Jason's affairs. They were a distasteful but, in her world, not uncommon byproduct of immense wealth and power. She had tolerated them with a cool detachment, as long as he was discreet and respected the unspoken rules of their arrangement. But this time was different. This time he had broken the cardinal rule. He had taken his mistress to their island, to the home where they had spent countless family vacations, where their children had taken their first steps on the sand. It was a violation, a desecration of a sacred space. But it wasn't just the sentimental attachment to the island that fueled her cold fury. It was the audacity, the sheer unadulterated arrogance of it. He believed he was untouchable, that his wealth was a shield that made him immune to consequences. He had underestimated her. He had mistaken her quiet dignity for weakness. For the past year, ever since she had first suspected this new, more serious affair, Callie had been quietly preparing. She had used her dormant legal skills to meticulously trace the labyrinthine network of shell corporations' offshore accounts and blind trusts that constituted the Hawthorne fortune. Jason, in his hubris, had granted her full power of attorney years ago, a convenience he now would come to regret. He saw her as a partner in his life, but not in his business. A beautiful, intelligent figurehead. He had forgotten that the most dangerous opponent is the one you never see coming. She took a sip of her oolong tea, her movements calm and deliberate. Her laptop was open on the polished mahogany desk, displaying a series of encrypted files. She had spent the last 24 hours in a state of hyper-focused activity, communicating with a small, fiercely loyal team of financial analysts and lawyers she had cultivated over the years. They had worked in secret moving with the precision of a special ops team, preparing for the financial equivalent of a nuclear strike. The final piece of her plan had fallen into place an hour ago. A private investigator she had hired had sent her a single high-resolution photograph. It was of Jason and Anastasia laughing as they boarded the golf cart at Mystique's airstrip. The image was a confirmation, but also an insult. The casual intimacy of the scene, the way Anastasia's hand rested on his arm. It was a public declaration of his betrayal. Callie's phone buzzed. It was a message from her lead lawyer, a man named Marcus Thorne, a shrewd, silver-haired veteran of Wall Street's bloodiest legal battles. "All systems are go, Callie. On your command." She typed a single word in reply. "Execute." Then she closed her laptop, stood up, and walked over to the large window that overlooked the glittering expanse of Central Park. The city lights twinkled like a carpet of diamonds, a world that Jason believed he owned. But as of this moment, he was a king in a gilded cage, blissfully unaware that the bars were about to slam shut back on Mystique. Jason and Anastasia had retired to the master suite. The room was a study in understated luxury, with floor-to-ceiling glass walls that offered a panoramic view of the moonlit sea. They made love with a practiced passion, a performance of desire that had become their currency. Afterwards, Jason lay back, sated and smug, the rhythmic sound of the waves a lullaby of his own success. He fell asleep with a smile on his face, oblivious to the storm that was gathering on the other side of the world. He was Jason Hawthorne, a master of the universe. And in his universe, the sun always rose on another perfect day. But as the first rays of dawn crept over the horizon, casting a golden glow on the tranquil waters of the Caribbean, a different kind of day was dawning for Jason Hawthorne. A day of reckoning. A day when his wife, the woman he had so carelessly underestimated, would prove that the only thing more dangerous than a woman scorned is a woman with power of attorney. The sun, a mercilessly cheerful orb in the cerulean sky, streamed through the glass walls of the master suite at Serenity's End. Jason awoke slowly, a languid stretch rippling through his well-maintained physique. He felt the familiar, pleasant ache of a night well spent. Anastasia was still asleep beside him, a tangle of honey-colored hair and smooth, tanned limbs. He allowed himself a moment of pure, unadulterated satisfaction. This was his life, a life he had built with his own 2 hands, his own cunning mind. He reached for his phone on the bedside table, a reflexive gesture for a man who started his day by checking the Asian markets. He swiped the screen, his thumb tracing the familiar pattern to unlock it. Nothing. He tried again. The screen remained stubbornly black. A flicker of annoyance, nothing more. He assumed it was a dead battery, a minor inconvenience in an otherwise perfect morning. He placed it on the wireless charging pad and padded naked to the ensuite bathroom, a cavernous space of Italian marble and chrome. As the steam from the rain shower filled the room, he began to mentally run through his day. A light breakfast on the terrace, a mid-morning sail, perhaps a call to his London office to gloat about the weather. The usual routine of a man for whom work and leisure were seamlessly intertwined. 40 minutes later, showered, shaved and dressed in a pair of crisp linen trousers and a polo shirt, he returned to the bedroom. Anastasia was stirring her emerald eyes, blinking open with a practiced kittenish charm. "Morning, sleepyhead," he said, leaning down to kiss her. "Morning," she murmured, her voice thick with sleep. "What time is it?" "Time for paradise." He answered, his good mood fully restored. He picked up his phone. It was now showing a 20% charge. He unlocked it, and his world began to unravel. A cascade of notifications flooded the screen. Emails, text messages, missed calls. They were all from the same source, his private banker in Zurich, his portfolio manager in New York, and most alarmingly, the chief financial officer of his company, Hawthorne Holdings. The subject lines were a frantic staccato of urgency. Urgent, account freeze, immediate action required. A cold dread, an emotion so alien to him it was almost unrecognizable, began to seep into his veins. He opened the first email, the one from his Swiss banker, a man named Klaus Richter, with whom he'd had a relationship built on discretion and mutual profit for over 2 decades. The message was brief and brutal. Subject, account freeze notification. Urgent. Dear Mr. Hawthorne, pursuant to a legally executed order received from the signatory with full power of attorney, Callie Vance Hawthorne, all assets held in accounts associated with your name and your affiliated entities at this institution have been placed under an immediate and indefinite administrative freeze. All access, including electronic transfers, withdrawals, and credit lines, has been suspended, pending further instruction from Mrs. Hawthorne. We are legally bound to comply with this directive. I am available to discuss the procedural aspects of this matter, but I must stress that the freeze itself is non-negotiable from our end. Sincerely, Klaus Richter. Jason's breath hitched. It felt like a physical blow. He scrolled frantically through the other messages. They were all variations on the same theme. His trading accounts frozen. His corporate credit cards declined. His personal lines of credit severed. It was a digital guillotine, and the blade had fallen with swift, silent precision. "Jules, what is it? You look like you've seen a ghost." Anastasia was sitting up now, the silk sheet pooled around her waist. The concern in her voice was edged with something else, a nascent anxiety. Her own gilded world was entirely dependent on the man, who was now staring at his phone with a look of utter disbelief. "Callie." He breathed the name, a curse on his lips. "That bitch." He scrambled to make a call, his fingers fumbling on the screen. He tried to call Marcus Thorne, his own lawyer, a man he paid a king's ransom to protect him from exactly this kind of disaster. The call wouldn't connect. A pre-recorded message, cold and impersonal, informed him that his service had been suspended due to non-payment. Of course. Callie had thought of everything. The Hawthorne family mobile plan was under a corporate account, an account she now controlled. Panic, raw and visceral, began to claw at his throat. He was on a private island, a place he had chosen for its isolation, and that very isolation was now a trap. He was cut off, neutered, a king without a kingdom. He threw the phone against the wall. It shattered with a satisfyingly violent crack. But the gesture did nothing to quell the rising tide of his fury and fear. He began to pace the room like a caged animal, his mind racing, trying to find a loophole, an escape route. There had to be a mistake, a misunderstanding. Callie was angry, yes. He had expected a tearful phone call, a demand for a new obscenely expensive piece of jewelry as a penance. Not this. This was scorched earth. This was a declaration of war. He thought back to their last conversation a week ago before he'd left for Mystique. It had been stilted cool. He'd told her he was going to a wellness retreat in Arizona, a lie so flimsy he was almost insulted she hadn't challenged it. He remembered the look in her eyes now. It wasn't sadness. It was something colder, harder. It was calculation. "What do you mean, Callie?" Anastasia asked, her voice trembling slightly. "What did she do? She froze everything," he snarled, turning to face her. "The accounts, the cards, everything." The color drained from Anastasia's face. The diamond bracelet on her wrist suddenly looked less like a symbol of love and more like a piece of rapidly depreciating collateral. "But how can she do that?" she stammered. "Power of attorney," he spat. "I gave it to her years ago, a fucking formality." He ran his hands through his hair, his composure completely gone. "I have to get off this island. I have to get to New York." He stormed out of the bedroom, Anastasia scrambling to follow him, pulling on a silk robe. He found the villa's manager, a calm, unflappable man named Mr. Baptiste, arranging a bouquet of hibiscus on a console table in the main living area. "Baptiste," Jason barked, his voice raw with urgency. "I need the jet, now! Ready the airstrip!" Mr. Baptiste looked at him with an expression of polite regret. "I am very sorry, Mr. Hawthorne, but that will not be possible." "What do you mean, not possible?" Jason demanded, his voice rising to a dangerous pitch. "I own the jet. I pay your salary. Get it done." "I received an email this morning, sir," Mr. Baptiste said, his gaze unwavering. "From Mrs. Hawthorne's office. The flight crew has been recalled to New York. The jet is no longer at our disposal. Furthermore, sir, all operational expenses for Serenity's End, including staff salaries and supplies, are to be billed directly to Mrs. Hawthorne's new primary account. We have been instructed not to extend any further credit to you personally." The words hung in the air, each one a hammer blow. He was not just a prisoner. He was a guest in a home that was no longer his. He was stranded, penniless, and utterly, completely at his wife's mercy. He looked around the magnificent room, at the priceless art on the walls, the stunning view of the sea, the very air thick with the scent of his own success. It was all a mirage. The gilded cage had become a real one. Just then a member of the staff entered, carrying a silver tray. On it was a single sealed envelope. "This was delivered by special courier from the mainland this morning, Mr. Hawthorne," the staff member said. Jason snatched the envelope. His name was written on the front in Callie's elegant, familiar script. His heart pounded as he tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of heavy, cream-colored paper. The message was short, but it was the most devastating blow of all. "Jason, enjoying the view. I've always found it so inspiring. It gives one such a sense of perspective. By the way, I took the liberty of changing the Wi-Fi password. It's now no more secrets. All one word. Lowercase. I'll be in touch. Callie." He stared at the note, his hands trembling. The cruelty of it, the sheer calculated brilliance, was breathtaking. She hadn't just cut off his money. She had cut off his connection to the world, his ability to fight back. She had left him with nothing but a Wi-Fi password that was a constant mocking reminder of his own folly. He sank into a chair, the fight draining out of him, replaced by a cold, terrifying emptiness. The sun was high in the sky now, the day in full, glorious swing. But for Jason Hawthorne, the world had gone dark. He was a millionaire on a private island, and he was, for the first time in his adult life, utterly and completely broke. The silence of paradise was now the sound of his own ruin. In the silent, air-conditioned chill of her Park Avenue library, Callie Hawthorne monitored the fallout with the dispassionate focus of a chess grandmaster. Her screens displayed a complex web of financial data, legal communications, and market reactions. The freezing of Jason's assets had sent minor but noticeable tremors through certain financial circles. Whispers were starting. A titan was stumbling. Marcus Thorne, her lawyer, sat opposite her, a file of documents open on his lap. He had been a friend of her father's, and his loyalty was to the woman he had known since she was a precocious teenager, not to the husband she had married. "The initial phase is complete." "Callie," he said, his voice a gravelly baritone. "The assets are secured. He's completely locked out. We've also filed for a temporary restraining order, citing financial misappropriation, which will prevent him from attempting to open new lines of credit or liquidate any undeclared assets we might have missed." "Good," Callie said, her eyes not leaving the screen. "What about Hawthorne Holdings?" "That's the delicate part," Marcus admitted. "Jason is the face and the primary stakeholder. The board is already panicking. They're calling an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning. You as the holder of his proxy, and now the controller of his majority shares, will be expected to attend." Callie finally looked at him. "I'll be there." "They will not be friendly," Marcus warned. "You're walking into a viper's nest. They see you as the vengeful wife, not a corporate leader." "Let them," Callie said, a flicker of steel in her eyes. "They've profited from his recklessness for years. It's time they were introduced to a more stable form of management." Her phone rang. It was a private number 1 she had been waiting for. She motioned for Marcus to stay as she answered, putting the call on speaker. "This is Callie Hawthorne." A man's voice, with a faint, unplaceable European accent, replied. "Mrs. Hawthorne." My name is Nikolai. I believe you were expecting my call." Nikolai was a ghost, a specialist in a field that didn't officially exist. He was a forensic investigator of the digital and financial underworld, a man who could find anything and anyone for the right price. Callie had engaged his services 6 months ago. "Nikolai," she said, her voice even. "Do you have it?" "I do," he confirmed. It was as you suspected. Well hidden. A labyrinth of trusts registered in the Cayman Islands, funneling into a numbered account in Liechtenstein, all under a holding company named Dubois Acquisitions. Callie's expression didn't change, but Marcus raised an eyebrow. Dubois, Anastasia's surname. "And the beneficiary?" Callie asked. "The sole beneficiary is a Miss Anastasia Dubois, contingent upon her cohabitation with Mr. Hawthorne for a period of no less than 5 years. Or upon his death," Nikolai explained. "It's a substantial trust, Mrs. Hawthorne, in the region of $50 million. He was setting her up for life." There it was, the ultimate betrayal. It wasn't just the affair, the casual flings she had learned to compartmentalize. This was a plan, a future, a replacement. The trust was funded by the sale of pre-IPO shares from a tech company Jason backed 2 years ago. Nikolai continued. "An asset he never declared in your shared portfolio. I have the full transaction history. It's a clear case of marital asset concealment." "Thank you, Nikolai," Callie said calmly. "Transfer the files to the encrypted server we discussed. Your final payment has been authorized." She ended the call. The room was silent for a moment. 50 million. Marcus breathed, shaking his head. The unmitigated gall. "It's not about the money," Marcus Callie said, her voice dangerously quiet. "It's the premeditation. This wasn't a mistake. It was a strategy." She looked at the photo of Jason and Anastasia, still on her desk. The laughing, carefree couple. They weren't just on vacation. They were celebrating their future. A new, harder resolve settled over her. This was no longer just about teaching Jason a lesson. It was about dismantling the empire he had built on a foundation of lies. Back on Mustique, the initial shock had given way to a grim, suffocating reality. The paradise of yesterday had become a prison. The attentive staff now moved around Jason with a polite but distinct distance. They still served him his meals, but the warmth was gone. He was no longer the master of the house. He was a problem to be managed. Anastasia had retreated into a sullen silence. The dream had evaporated, and she was left with the terrifying prospect of a future she hadn't planned for. Her beauty was her only real currency, and its value was inextricably linked to the patronage of powerful men. With Jason's downfall, her own stock was plummeting. "There has to be something you can do," she said for the 10th time that day. They were sitting on the veranda, the untouched lunch growing cold between them. "What would you have me do?" "Anastasia." Jason snapped, his patience worn thin. "Swim to the mainland. Send a message in a bottle. You're Jason Hawthorne. You know people, powerful people," she insisted, her voice rising with a note of hysteria. "My powerful people can't be reached on a phone that doesn't work, with a credit card that's been declined," he roared. "Don't you understand? She's cut me off at the knees." He slumped back in his chair, the fight draining out of him. He felt old, tired, and for the first time in his life, utterly powerless. His thoughts drifted back to Callie. Not the cold, calculating woman who had engineered his downfall, but the brilliant, fiery young lawyer he had first met at a fundraiser 2 decades ago. He had been captivated by her intelligence, her wit, her unassailable sense of self. He had pursued her relentlessly, seeing her as the ultimate acquisition, the perfect partner to legitimize his new money and build a dynasty. He had won her, married her, and then, over the years, he had slowly, carelessly taken her for granted. He had put her on a pedestal, admired her as a beautiful object, and forgotten about the formidable mind that lay behind the elegant facade. He had forgotten who she was. A memory surfaced unbidden. They were on this very island years ago. Their son Thomas was 5 and their daughter Chloe was 3. They were building a sand castle, and Jason, ever the ambitious builder, was trying to create an elaborate structure with turrets and moats. But the dry sand kept collapsing. It was Callie who had shown him the simple trick of mixing the sand with water to give it structure. You can't build anything lasting on a weak foundation. Jason, she had said her words light, but her meaning clear. He had laughed it off at the time. Now the memory felt like a prophecy. His empire, his life, was a sand castle built on a foundation of deceit. And Callie had just kicked it over. Desperate, he remembered the villa's satellite phone, a piece of emergency equipment he hadn't thought about in years. It was kept in the study in a locked safe. He found Mr. Baptiste and demanded the key. The manager, after a moment of hesitation, complied. The instructions from Mrs. Hawthorne had been about financial credit, not about a dusty old piece of hardware. Jason's hands trembled as he dialed the number for his New York office, bypassing the switchboard and calling his CFO David Chen directly on his private line. Chen was a numbers man, loyal only to the bottom line. David Jason said, his voice urgent. "It's Jason Hawthorne." There was a pause on the other end. "Jason, where are you?" "The board is in chaos." "Listen to me, David. Callie has gone insane. She's frozen everything. I need you to bypass her. Set up a new corporate account, transfer funds, do whatever you have to do. I'll make it worth your while. A 7-figure bonus, now." The silence on the other end stretched for an eternity. Jason could hear the faint sound of typing. "I'm sorry, Jason," David said, finally, his voice cold and formal. "I can't do that." "What do you mean, you can't?" Jason bellowed. "I'm the CEO. According to the documents I received this morning from Marcus Thorne." David said, his voice devoid of emotion. "You are the majority shareholder. However, your voting rights and all executive powers have been legally transferred via your power of attorney to Callie Hawthorne. She is for all intents and purposes the new CEO of Hawthorne Holdings. The board is meeting with her tomorrow to formalize the transition. Any instruction I take from you would be illegal." The phone slipped from Jason's hand and clattered onto the desk. CEO. She had not just taken his money. She had taken his company, his identity, his life's work. Furthermore, David added his voice, a final dispassionate nail in the coffin, "Mrs. Hawthorne has already been in contact. She's authorized a full independent audit of all executive accounts and expenses for the last 10 years. She specifically mentioned a forensic look into the pre-IPO sale of your shares in a company called Innovate AI. Jason's blood ran cold. Innovate AI, the source of the funds for Anastasia's secret trust. She knew. She knew everything. This was no longer a marital dispute. This was a corporate takeover, a coup d'etat. And he was not just an exiled king. He was a potential criminal. He stumbled out of the study and onto the veranda, the brilliant Caribbean sun feeling like a spotlight on his humiliation. Anastasia looked up at him, her face a mask of anxious hope. Did you get through? Is it fixed? He just stared at her, the architect of his ruin. The $50 million woman. He looked at her youthful beauty, the carefully constructed artifice of her charm, and he felt nothing. No desire, no anger, just a vast, empty wasteland of regret. "Pack your bags, Anastasia," he said, his voice hollow. "Are we leaving?" she asked, a flicker of excitement in her eyes. "You are," he said, looking out at the endless, indifferent sea. "I'm not sure about me." He finally understood. Callie hadn't just stranded him on a private island. She had put him in a beautifully appointed cage and thrown away the key. And the name of the cage was Mystique. He was trapped in paradise, with nothing but the ghost of the man he used to be. The emergency board meeting of Hawthorne Holdings was convened in a room that radiated power. Located on the 50th floor of a skyscraper in the heart of Wall Street, the boardroom featured a gargantuan mahogany table polished to a mirror-shine chairs upholstered in dark grey leather and a panoramic view of the financial district. A concrete jungle where fortunes were made and lost in the blink of an eye. The air was thick with tension and testosterone. The board consisted of 10 men, a collection of grizzled industry veterans, slick corporate lawyers, and hard-nosed financiers. They were men who had ridden the wave of Jason Hawthorne's aggressive, often brutal business strategies to immense personal wealth. They were loyal to Jason, but more so, they were loyal to the status quo, to the river of money that flowed from his ventures. And now, a foreign element was being introduced into their ecosystem. They were waiting for Callie Hawthorne. The whispers had been flying all morning. Jason was incommunicado. His assets were frozen. His wife, the society hostess, the woman who organized charity galas, was making a power play. The consensus was that this was a domestic squabble, writ large an embarrassment that needed to be contained quickly. They would placate her offer a generous settlement and get things back to normal. The double doors of the boardroom opened, and Callie walked in. She was not the woman they expected. She was not clad in a demure dress, but in a sharply tailored dark navy pantsuit that spoke of authority. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant chignon. She was flanked by Marcus Thorne and 2 other lawyers from his firm, who moved with the quiet confidence of people who knew they held all the cards. Callie took her place at the head of the table, the seat that had always been Jason's, the seat that by proxy was now hers. The room fell silent. "Good morning, gentlemen," she said, her voice calm and clear, resonating with an authority they had never heard from her before. "Thank you for assembling on such short notice. I know there are many questions. Let me be direct. As of 9:00 a.m. yesterday, I have taken full operational and financial control of Jason Hawthorne's personal and corporate assets, including his majority stake in this company. A man named Robert Harrison, a portly, red-faced industrialist who was one of Jason's oldest allies, spoke first. "Now see here, Callie," he began, his tone condescending. "We all understand this is a difficult time, a personal matter. But this company is a multi-billion-dollar entity. You can't just—" "I can." Callie interrupted, her gaze sharp as a razor. "And I have. This is no longer a personal matter, Robert. This is a matter of corporate governance and fiduciary responsibility. For the past 48 hours, my team has been conducting a preliminary review of the company's financials. What we've found is concerning." She nodded to Marcus, who placed a sleek black folder in front of each board member. "Inside these folders," Callie continued, "you will find evidence of what my lawyers have termed gross financial mismanagement. You will find details of undeclared shell corporations, the use of corporate funds for personal expenses on a truly staggering scale, and the channeling of company profits into high-risk personal side ventures without board knowledge or approval. The board members began to flip through the documents, their expressions shifting from skepticism to shock, and then to a dawning, horrified understanding. The whispers died, replaced by the rustle of paper. I draw your attention to page 5. Callie said, her voice dropping slightly, drawing them in. It details the sale of pre-IPO shares in a tech company called Innovate AI, an asset that belonged to Hawthorne Holdings. The proceeds of that sale, approximately $53 million, were not reinvested into this company. They were diverted into a private trust registered in Liechtenstein. The sole beneficiary of this trust is a Miss Anastasia Dubois. The name hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Some of the men in the room had met Anastasia at company events. They knew who she was. The dots connected with sickening speed. This wasn't just infidelity. This was embezzlement. Jason Hawthorne has used this company as his personal piggy bank. Callie stated, her voice now ringing with cold fury. He has exposed all of you and our shareholders to enormous legal and financial risk. The SEC would have a field day with this, not to mention the IRS. The mood in the room had shifted completely. The vipers were no longer looking at her. They were looking at each other, their faces pale. The condescension was gone, replaced by fear. They were thinking of their own fortunes, their own reputations, their own potential complicity. "This is a catastrophe," mumbled another board member, a man named Henderson. No, Callie countered, her voice firm. It was a catastrophe waiting to happen. Today is the course correction. As of this moment, Hawthorne Holdings is under new leadership. My leadership. We will conduct a full, transparent, and brutal audit of every department. We will claw back every misappropriated dollar. We will cut off the dead wood and restructure from the top down. We will restore integrity and stability to this company. And we will not only survive, we will become stronger and more profitable than ever before. She paused, letting her words sink in. She looked at each man, meeting their gaze, daring them to challenge her. "You have a choice, gentlemen," she said, her voice softening almost imperceptibly. "You can fight me, and I will dissolve this board and install a new one by the end of the week. Or you can work with me. You can help me clean up the mess your friend and former CEO has made. Your positions and your considerable stock options will be secure provided you are willing to embrace a new era of transparency and accountability." It was a master stroke. She had shown them the abyss, then offered them a lifeline. She wasn't just the vengeful wife. She was their savior. She was offering them amnesty in exchange for allegiance. Robert Harrison, the man who had tried to patronize her just minutes before, cleared his throat. "Callie." "Mrs. Hawthorne," he said, his tone now one of deep respect. "What do you need from us?" The coup was complete. Meanwhile, on Mustique, Jason had managed to find a way to make an outbound call using the villa's landline, billing it to a sympathetic hotelier on a neighboring island who owed him a favor from years past. His first call was not to a lawyer or a banker, but to his son Thomas. Thomas was 22, a recent graduate of Wharton, and possessed his mother's sharp intellect, though it was tempered by a youthful idealism that Jason had never quite understood. "Dad, what's going on? Mum's lawyers are everywhere. They're saying..." Listen to me, Thomas, Jason said, his voice low and urgent. Your mother has lost her mind. She's trying to destroy me, to destroy everything I've built for you and Chloe. There was a pause on the other end. She says you stole from the company Dad, that you set up a secret trust for your girlfriend. The bluntness of the accusation coming from his own son was like a punch to the gut. It's complicated, Thomas. It's business. Your mother doesn't understand. I think she understands perfectly, Thomas replied, his voice cold. I saw the documents, Dad. I'm at the office. She asked me to help with the audit. Jason felt a fresh wave of despair wash over him. She had turned his own son against him. She was not just dismantling his empire, she was erasing him from his own family. Thomas, you're my son, he pleaded, his voice cracking. You have to help me. Help you do what Dad Thomas asked, and there was a genuine, painful confusion in his voice. Help you hide more money. Help you lie to my mother. The woman you were supposed to love and protect. The woman who gave up her own career for you. She did this to herself. Jason roared, the desperation making him cruel. She knew the deal. No, Dad Thomas, said, his voice hardening, with a resolve that sounded eerily like his mother's. You knew the deal. You had a wife who was your partner in every sense of the word, and you treated her like an accessory. You had a family, and you gambled it all away for what, a younger model on a private island. I'm sorry, Dad. But you're on your own. The line went dead. Jason stood there, the receiver in his hand, the dial tone a mournful, mocking sound. He had lost his company. He had lost his son. He looked over at Anastasia, who was now frantically packing her designer luggage, a vulture picking at the carcass of their affair. He realized with a clarity that was both terrifying and liberating that he had nothing left to lose. But Callie had made one miscalculation. A man with nothing left to lose is a dangerous man. He is unpredictable. And as the sun set on another day in his gilded prison, a new desperate plan began to form in Jason Hawthorne's mind. If he couldn't get his empire back, he would do the next best thing. He would burn it to the ground. The news of Callie Hawthorne's boardroom coup spread through the elite circles of New York and London like wildfire. The initial narrative of a simple domestic dispute was quickly replaced by a more complex and compelling story. The quiet, elegant wife had revealed herself to be a corporate shark of the highest order. Callie, once a fixture on the society pages, was now a subject of fascination in the Wall Street Journal and the Financial Times. She was no longer Mrs. Jason Hawthorne. She was Callie Vance Hawthorne, the interim CEO of a rebranded and suddenly intriguing Hawthorne Holdings. She worked with a relentless surgical precision. The audit she had initiated was unearthing years of Jason's financial legerdemain. She fired executives who were too deeply embedded in Jason's culture of corruption and promoted bright, overlooked talent from within the company. She met with bankers, reassured investors, and in a move of pure strategic brilliance, she scheduled a sit-down interview with a respected female journalist known for her tough, incisive profiles. She was controlling the narrative, recasting herself from the scorned woman to the savvy savior of a company on the brink. She also took care of the Anastasia problem. Marcus Thorne, on her instruction, sent a curt legal notice to the villa on Moustique. It informed Miss Dubois that the pre-nuptial agreement she thought she had with Jason, the $50 million trust, was now the subject of a criminal investigation into the fraudulent concealment of marital assets. Any attempt to against the funds would be met with immediate legal action. It also included a one-way economy-class plane ticket from St. Vincent to her hometown of Cleveland, Ohio, valid for the next 72 hours. The message was clear. The party was over. On Mystique, the arrival of the legal notice and the plane ticket sent Anastasia into a final panicked spiral. She turned on Jason her carefully constructed mask of adoration, crumbling to reveal the raw, grasping ambition beneath. "You ruined me," she shrieked, her voice echoing through the now sterile villa. "That money was mine, you promised me." Jason, who was now operating on a strange, almost detached level of consciousness, looked at her with a kind of weary pity. "It was never your money, Anastasia. It was my wife's. You were just the rental, and the lease is up." The cruelty of his words and the truth behind them silenced her. Within hours, she was gone. Mr. Baptiste arranged for a boat to take her to the main island of St. Vincent to catch her flight. As Jason watched her disappear over the horizon, he felt nothing. No sense of loss, no relief, just a vast, echoing emptiness. He was truly alone now, a ghost rattling around in the opulent mausoleum of his former life. The staff continued to feed him to maintain the property, all on Callie's dime. He was her prisoner, a living testament to her victory. He spent his days pacing the white sand beach, the Wi-Fi password, no more secrets, a constant ironic torment. But in his isolation, Jason's mind, the same mind that had built a billion-dollar empire, was not idle. It was turning, calculating, searching for one final desperate move. He couldn't win. He knew that. Callie had outmaneuvered him at every turn, but he could still unleash chaos. He could still inflict pain. He still had one secret left. It was a secret buried deep in the foundations of Hawthorne Holdings, a piece of information so toxic, so dangerous, that he had never even committed it to paper. It was a ghost from his past, a deal he had made at the very beginning of his career, a deal that had given him his initial seed capital, but had made him a silent partner in something deeply illicit. Years ago, when he was just a hungry, ambitious trader, he had facilitated a massive off-the-books currency trade for a Russian oligarch, a man named Dmitry Volkov. Volkov was not just a wealthy businessman. He was a key figure in a shadowy syndicate, a man with deep ties to organized crime and a reputation for unspeakable brutality. The deal had been dirty a way for Volkov to launder hundreds of millions of dollars out of Russia. Jason's reward had been a quiet, untraceable $10 million, the money he had used to start his own firm. He had justified it as a one-time sin, the necessary evil that had paved the way for his legitimate success. He had buried the memory and his connection to Volkov so deep, he had almost convinced himself it never happened. But Volkov never forgot. And Volkov did not like his business partners airing their dirty laundry in the Wall Street Journal. Using the last of the favors he was owed, Jason managed to get a message out through a chain of intermediaries. It was a simple message delivered to a specific lawyer in Cyprus who worked for Volkov. The message was, Callie Hawthorne's audit of Hawthorne Holdings is about to uncover the Genesis transaction. She is a threat to our mutual interests. It was the financial equivalent of pulling the pin on a grenade and leaving it in the boardroom. He had no idea what Volkov would do. Maybe nothing. Maybe something terrible. It was a roll of the dice, an act of pure nihilistic destruction. If he was going down, he would pull the entire temple down with him. A few days later, Callie was leaving the Hawthorne Holdings building late at night. She was tired, but invigorated. The restructuring was working. The stock was stabilizing. She had proven herself. As she walked towards her waiting car, two men in dark suits stepped out of the shadows. They were large, impassive, and they moved with an unnerving professional calm. Her driver, a former police officer, immediately tensed. "Mrs. Hawthorne, get in the car." But one of the men was already holding the door, his other hand inside his jacket. He didn't smile. "Mrs. Hawthorne," he said, his English thick with a Russian accent. "Mr. Volkov sends his regards. He is an old friend of your husband's. He has some concerns about your recent activities. He would like a meeting to discuss the past." A chill colder than any she had felt during the entire ordeal ran down Callie's spine. Volkov. She didn't know the name, but she understood the tone. This was not a corporate negotiation. This was a threat of a different order of magnitude. She realized with sickening clarity what Jason had done. Cornered and defeated, he had unleashed a monster. He had reached back into the darkest chapter of his past and sicked it on her. This was no longer about money or infidelity or corporate control. This was about survival. Callie, ever the strategist, showed no fear. She looked the man in the eye, her expression unreadable. "Tell Mr. Volkov," she said, her voice steady, "that I am always happy to meet with friends of my husband. Have him call my office to schedule an appointment." She got into her car, and it sped away into the night. But as she leaned back against the leather seat, the facade of calm dissolved, and she allowed herself a single, silent tear. Not of fear, but of a profound and bitter disappointment. She had fought a war, and won only to discover that her husband's final act of betrayal was to ensure that even in victory, she would never ever be free of him. The battle for Hawthorne Holdings was over, but a new, more dangerous war had just begun. The millionaire had been dethroned. His mistress discarded his accounts, frozen. But the consequences of his secrets were only just beginning to surface, threatening to pull everyone victor and vanquished alike into the undertow. The story of Jason and Callie Hawthorne isn't just a tale of wealth and betrayal. It's a chilling reminder that the secrets we keep are often more valuable and more dangerous than any stock portfolio. Callie won the corporate war, proving herself a master strategist in a world that had always underestimated her. But Jason's final desperate act, unleashing a ghost from his criminal past, has changed the game entirely. The battle for money is over, but the fight for survival has just begun. Can Callie outwit a ruthless oligarch with the same brilliance she used to dismantle her husband's empire? Or will Jason's last act of spite be the one that destroys them all? The story is far from over. If you were captivated by this tale of drama, intrigue, and high-stakes revenge, make sure to like this video and share it with someone who loves a good story. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next chapter in the unraveling of the Hawthorne dynasty. What do you think Callie should do next? Let us know in the comments below. The soft hiss of a zipper cutting through the midnight silence of a $30 million Tribeca penthouse was the only sound Gideon Roth made. He moved like a ghost in his own home, past the Murano glass sculptures and the Jean-Michel Basquiat painting that hung in the foyer. In the master bedroom, illuminated only by the cold blue glow of the city. Outside, his wife Naomi slept, her body curled around the precious new life growing within her. Their son was the picture of peaceful trust, a trust Gideon was about to detonate. He wouldn't even leave a note. Notes were for sentimental fools. He was leaving a life behind, and by morning, the only evidence of his departure would be the empty space beside his sleeping, pregnant wife. The air in the penthouse was chilled to a precise 68 degrees Fahrenheit, a temperature Gideon insisted upon for optimal sleep. Tonight, however, the cold felt different. It was the sterile, unforgiving cold of a decision made. Gideon Roth, CEO of Nexus Capital, and a man whose face had graced the cover of Forbes under the headline, "The Digital Midas," was performing the final, quietest act of a meticulously planned betrayal. His bag, a sleek leather weekender from Bottega Veneta, was already packed. It sat by the door of his cavernous walk-in closet, filled not with the bespoke Brioni suits he wore to command boardrooms, but with the casual, expensive linens of a man disappearing to paradise. A Patek Philippe watch with a dual time zone function, a gift from Naomi for their 3rd anniversary, was already strapped to his wrist. One time zone was set to New York. The other was already set for the Leeward Islands. He paused at the bedroom door, his hand hovering over the cool brass handle. A flicker of something guilt, perhaps, or a vestige of the man he used to be made him look back. Naomi shifted in her sleep, a soft murmur escaping her lips. Her hand rested protectively on the swell of her belly, now 7 months along. They had been ecstatic at the ultrasound just last week, watching the tiny, thrumming heartbeat of their son. They'd already named him Leo. Gideon had held her hand, his eyes misty, and sworn he'd never felt a love so profound. It was a flawless performance. The memory should have paralyzed him. Instead, it was gasoline on the fire of his desperation. That life, the one of impending fatherhood, of PTA meetings and suburban obligations, felt like a gilded cage closing in on him. Naomi, with her gentle strength, her unwavering belief in him, her perfect pedigree and social grace, had become the beautiful, unknowing warden. He felt suffocated by the sheer, unblemished goodness of it all. He craved chaos. He craved the thrilling, selfish pulse of a life lived for no one but himself. And that pulse had a name, Kendra Lowell. His phone buzzed silently in his pocket, a single vibration he had programmed just for her. Wheels up in 45. The driver is at the corner of Greenwich and Nen Moor. Kendra. She was everything Naomi was not. Ambitious, sharp-edged, and utterly unsentimental. A PR executive from a rival firm, she had met Gideon at a tech gala 6 months ago. Their affair had started with clandestine lunches at forgotten downtown bistros and escalated to stolen weekends in the Hamptons while Naomi visited her parents in Connecticut. With Kendra, he wasn't a future father or a husband. He was just Gideon, a powerful, desired man. She didn't want a family. She wanted the world, and she saw him as the rocket to get her there. He knew it, and he didn't care. Her ambition was a mirror to his own. He pulled the bedroom door shut with an almost imperceptible click. In the hallway, the sterile silence of the apartment seemed to judge him. Every piece of art, every custom-designed piece of furniture, was a testament to the life he and Naomi had built. A life he was now throwing away like a losing stock. He slipped on his driving loafers, grabbed the bag, and walked towards the private elevator that opened directly into his apartment. As he pressed the button, his reflection stared back at him from the polished bronze doors, a handsome man in his late 30s, his dark hair perfectly styled, Even at this hour, his jaw set. He looked like a man in complete control, but inside his heart hammered against his ribs a frantic drumbeat of fear and exhilaration. The elevator descended a smooth, silent drop from his life in the sky to the waiting escape on the street. He stepped out into the pre-dawn chill of Manhattan. A black Cadillac Escalade was idling exactly where Kendra said it would be. The driver, a discreet professional from a private service he didn't recognize, stepped out and took his bag without a word. Gideon slid into the plush leather interior. The city lights blurred as the car pulled away from the curb. He didn't look back at the monolithic glass tower, where his pregnant wife slept, dreaming, he presumed, of the perfect life they shared. He couldn't afford to. He took out his phone and typed a single message to Kendra. "On my way. Burn the ships." Her reply was instantaneous. "The fires are already lit, baby." A slow smile spread across Gideon's face. It was done. He was free. Or so he thought. The Gulfstream GC650 cut through the stratosphere, a silver needle stitching a path from the cold reality of New York to the fantasy of St. Bart's. Inside the world was champagne and soft leather. Kendra Lowell was draped across the seat opposite Gideon, her long, tanned legs propped up on the edge of his. She was wearing a silk jumpsuit that shimmered under the cabin's soft lighting, and her laughter was as bright and bubbly as the Dom Perignon in her flute. "To us," she said, raising her glass. "To new beginnings, and to never having to check into a hotel under the name Mr. Smith again." Gideon clinked his glass against hers. "To St. Bart's." He watched her as she sipped her champagne, her eyes sparkling with triumph. Kendra was beautiful, undeniably so, but her allure was more than just physical. It was her razor-sharp ambition, the way she looked at the world as a series of objectives to be conquered. She had conquered him, and it was a surrender he had welcomed. "Did you—" she began, her voice dropping slightly, the only hint of vulnerability she ever showed. "She was asleep," Gideon said, cutting her off. He didn't want to talk about Naomi. He didn't want to picture her waking up reaching for him and finding only cold sheets. "She won't know anything until morning. By then we'll be having breakfast overlooking the Caribbean." Kendra's smile returned brighter than before. "Good, no loose ends. My boss at Edelman is going to have a conniption when he gets my resignation email. But then again, dating the CEO of Nexus Capital is a bit of a conflict of interest. Wouldn't you say?" "Ex-CEO soon enough," Gideon mused, swirling the scotch in his tumbler. That was part of the plan. He had already set in motion his sabbatical. He would step down citing personal reasons and burnout, handing the reins to his competent but uninspired COO Robert. He had liquidated a significant portion of his personal stock portfolio over the past few months, funneling the money into untraceable offshore accounts. He had built an empire, and now he was walking away with a king's ransom. The flight passed in a haze of alcohol and intoxicating plans for the future. They talked about buying a villa in Monaco, a yacht to sail the Greek islands, attending the Cannes Film Festival, not as guests, but as power players. It was a fantasy woven from money and ego, and for Gideon, it was the perfect antidote to the quiet domestic life that had begun to feel like a death sentence. They landed at Gustav III Airport, the notoriously short runway, a thrilling welcome to the island. A private concierge met them on the tarmac, whisking them through customs and into a waiting Range Rover. The villa was a modernist masterpiece carved into the cliffs of Gouverneur, with an infinity pool that seemed to spill directly into the turquoise sea. "It's perfect," Kendra breathed. Walking through the open-plan living area and out onto the sprawling terrace. "I had it booked for weeks," Gideon said, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. He inhaled the scent of her perfume, a heady mix of tuberose and ambition. This was real. The weight of his other life was an ocean away. The first 24 hours were idyllic. They swam in the pool, drank rosé on the sun-drenched terrace, and made love with a desperate energy, as if to physically erase any lingering trace of his past. Gideon felt a lightness he hadn't experienced in years. He didn't check his New York phone, which he had powered down and tucked into the bottom of his suitcase. He was off the grid. He was a new man. The first crack in the perfect facade appeared the next afternoon. He was lounging by the pool while Kendra was on a video call with her lawyer, finalizing the details of her wrongful termination suit against her old firm, a golden parachute she'd engineered with Gideon's help. His burner phone, a simple prepaid device for emergencies, buzzed on the table beside him. It was a number he didn't recognize, but the New York area code sent a jolt of anxiety through him. He ignored it. It buzzed again. And again. On the fourth call, he answered, his voice clipped. "Hello. Is this Gideon Roth?" The voice was professional female and unfamiliar. "Who is this?" "My name is Dr. Lena Hansen. I'm Naomi Roth's obstetrician. I'm calling because we had her 30-week scan scheduled for this morning and she missed the appointment. We've been unable to reach her on her cell or the home phone. Given the circumstances, we thought it best to try her emergency contacts." Gideon's blood ran cold. "The circumstances? What circumstances?" "It was a high-risk appointment, Mr. Roth. We noted a slight arrhythmia in the baby's heartbeat last week and wanted to monitor it closely. It's likely nothing, but we never advise missing these scans. Is Naomi with you?" "Is she all right?" The world tilted on its axis. An arrhythmia. Naomi had told him the doctor said everything was perfect. Had she been protecting him from worry? Or had she simply not wanted to burden him? The image of her alone in that vast apartment, possibly worried or unwell, pierced through his bubble of selfish bliss. The baby. Leo, his son. I'm not with her, he stammered. I'm traveling for work. The lie tasted like ash in his mouth. I'll try and reach her right away. He hung up his hand, trembling. He tried Naomi's number from his burner phone. It went straight to voicemail. Her inbox was full. He tried the landline. It rang and rang until the automated operator took over. Panic began to claw at his throat. What if something was wrong? What if she'd woken up? Realized he was gone, and the shock had sent her into premature labor. What if she was hurt alone, unable to call for help? Kendra finished her call and sauntered over, stretching languidly like a cat. Good news. They're settling. Who was that? Wrong number. Gideon lied, his mind racing. The paradise he had built was suddenly a prison. The sun felt too hot, the sea too loud. The beautiful woman beside him looked like a stranger. In that moment, he realized that you can't burn a ship if your entire life is still on board. He had to go back. He had to make sure she was okay. He would tell her some lie, a sudden, unavoidable business crisis in Zurich. He was good at lying. He just needed to see her to know that she and the baby were safe. Then he could disappear for good. Change of plans. He said, his voice strained. We have to go back. There's an emergency at the company. Kendra's face fell. Her perfect smile replaced by a mask of petulant disbelief. What Gideon know? You said you were done. We just got here. It's non-negotiable, he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. He was already on the phone with the aviation charter, his voice all command and authority again. "I need my jet fueled and ready for departure. Destination Teterboro, immediately." The escape was over. He was flying back into the storm, completely unaware that the storm was not what he thought it was. It was not a medical emergency or a heartbroken wife. It was something far colder, far more calculated, and it was waiting for him patiently in his home office. The sun rose over Manhattan, casting long shadows between the skyscrapers. In the Roths' penthouse, the morning light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the silent air. The bed, an acre of white Egyptian cotton, was empty on one side. The indentation of Gideon's head was still faintly visible on his pillow. Naomi Roth did not wake with a start. She did not wake with a gasp or a frantic search for the man who was supposed to be beside her. She awoke slowly, calmly at her usual time of 6:30 a.m., as the internal clock of her pregnancy had dictated for months. She lay still for a moment, feeling the gentle flutter of her son kicking beneath her ribs. She smiled a genuine, private smile. "Good morning, Leo," she whispered to her belly. Then, with a resolve that was as quiet and profound as the sunrise itself, she sat up. She looked at the empty side of the bed. She noted the missing weekender bag from Gideon's closet, the space on his valet tray where his Patek Philippe watch usually sat. There was no panic, no tears, just a deep, cold sense of confirmation. For a woman who looked the part of a pampered socialite, Naomi possessed a mind like a steel trap. Before she was Mrs. Gideon Roth, she was Naomi Prescott, a rising star in the world of forensic accounting. She had worked for Deloitte, specializing in uncovering complex financial fraud within multinational corporations. She could follow a single dollar through a labyrinth of shell companies, offshore accounts, and fraudulent invoices. She noticed patterns others missed. She was trained to see the truth buried beneath layers of deception. She had resigned after marrying Gideon, eager to embrace a new life. But the skills once honed never truly dulled. And for the past 4 months, she had been conducting the most important investigation of her career: her own husband. It had started with a subtle tell. A second phone she'd found charging in his gym bag, which he'd clumsily explained away as a dedicated international line for a sensitive deal in Singapore. Then came the unusual cash withdrawals from a secondary account, large, sporadic, and always just under the $10,000 federal reporting limit. To anyone else, they were nothing. To Naomi, they were red flags. She didn't confront him. She didn't cry or scream. She observed. She became the ghost in her own marriage, silently gathering data. While Gideon slept, she used her knowledge of his habits. His passwords were all variations of his first dog's name, and the year he founded his company, to access his personal accounts. What she found was a meticulously constructed secret life. She hired a private investigator, a discreet ex-Mossad agent named Ari, who charged a small fortune and was worth every penny. Ari had provided the name Kendra Lowell. He provided photos of them at a secluded hotel in the Berkshires of Kendra, driving a new Porsche Cayenne, a car registered to a Delaware-based LLC that Naomi quickly traced back to a slush fund Gideon had set up years ago. But the real evidence, the kind that truly mattered, she found herself. Digging into Nexus Capital's financials, she discovered a pattern of consulting fees being paid out to that same LLC. Gideon was embezzling from his own company, siphoning millions of dollars to fund his affair and build his escape hatch. He was a brilliant CEO, but a sloppy criminal, blinded by arrogance. He never imagined his gentle art history major wife would be capable of untangling his web. He had catastrophically underestimated her. This morning was not a discovery. It was an execution. She rose from the bed and went not to the phone to call her friends in a panic, but to her home office. She bypassed the sleek Mac on her own desk and went to Gideon's imposing mahogany desk. She turned on his computer. A moment later she was past his firewalls, her fingers flying across the keyboard. She downloaded the final pieces of evidence from the keylogger she had installed on his machine a month ago, transcripts of his encrypted chats with Kendra, his recent liquidation of personal stocks, the wire transfers to accounts in the Cayman Islands. It was all there. A complete portrait of a man dismantling his life in preparation for a new one. At 7:15 a.m., she missed a call from her obstetrician, Dr. Hansen. She saw the name flash on the screen and silenced it. She had fabricated the arrhythmia story and told the doctor's office last week that she would be unreachable for a few days due to a family matter, asking them to please try her husband's number if they needed anything for scheduling. It was a cruel, necessary breadcrumb, a way to puncture his bubble of paradise and reel him back. At 8:00 a.m., she called her lawyer, Benjamin Carter, a bulldog of a man who specialized in high-asset divorces. "He's gone." "Ben," she said, her voice steady. "He left last night. The plan is in motion. The documents are ready." Naomi Carter's voice crackled over the phone. "Are you sure about this? Once we file, there's no going back." "I've been sure for months," she said. She looked around the opulent penthouse at the life Gideon had bought, a life he thought defined her. He thinks he was escaping a cage. He has no idea he just walked into a trap. She spent the rest of the day in a state of hyper-focused calm. She ate a healthy breakfast for the baby. She did her prenatal yoga. She packed a small bag for herself, not with designer clothes, but with essentials. A laptop, several hard drives, and a thick file folder bound with a rubber band. She wasn't a woman scorned. She was a predator whose prey had finally taken the bait. While Gideon was flying back across the Atlantic, fueled by a manufactured panic, Naomi was preparing the battlefield. The confrontation wouldn't be a tearful showdown in their bedroom. It would be a corporate execution in the one place he felt most powerful, his office. And she would be the one holding the axe. The descent into Teterboro Airport was turbulent. The Gulf Stream shuddered as it passed through a thick bank of clouds, and for Gideon the physical jolts were a perfect match for the chaos raging in his mind. The idyllic haze of St. Bart's had evaporated, replaced by the cold, sharp-edged panic of a man whose carefully constructed worlds were about to collide. Kendra sat across from him, sullen and silent. She had barely spoken a word since his abrupt decision to leave. Her arms were crossed, her face a mask of bitter disappointment. The dream had lasted less than a day. "I don't understand why I couldn't just stay at the villa," she said for the 5th time, her voice tight with resentment. "You could have handled this and come back." "It's complicated, Kendra." Gideon snapped his patience worn thin. "My COO is calling a snapboard meeting. Something about a potential hostile takeover bid. It's all hands on deck. I need to be there." This was the lie he had settled on during the frantic flight. It was plausible urgent, and painted him as the indispensable hero swooping in to save his company. It was a much better narrative than "I panicked because my pregnant wife's doctor called." He had even called his COO Robert and left a vague, authoritative voicemail about rumors and the need to circle the wagons, laying the groundwork for his story. So this is it. Then Kendra asked, her voice laced with accusation. "We run away, and the first sign of trouble you run right back." "This isn't running back," he insisted, leaning forward. "This is protecting the assets. Our assets. The money, the resources for our future. It's all tied to Nexus. I have to put this fire out, and then I'm done. I promise." She looked at him, her sharp eyes searching his for any sign of weakness. She was a transactionalist at her core. As long as the ultimate payout was secure, she could tolerate a delay. Finally, she nodded. "Fine. But you're putting me up at the Mandarin Oriental. And this had better be quick, Gid." As soon as the jet's wheels touched the tarmac, Gideon's world split. He became two men. One was the suave lover, ushering Kendra into a waiting town car, with a kiss and a promise to call her as soon as he was free. The other was the worried husband, pulling out his New York phone and dialing Naomi's number with shaking hands. Still voicemail. He called the doorman at their building. "Frank, it's Gideon Roth. Have you seen my wife this morning?" "Oh yes, Mr. Roth. Good morning, sir." Mrs. Roth left about an hour ago. A car picked her up. A car. "Did you see what kind?" "A black town car, sir. Looked like a corporate service." Relief washed over Gideon, so potent it almost made him dizzy. She was okay. She was up and about. She must have just gone to her doctor's appointment late. The arrhythmia was probably nothing, just as the doctor said. He had panicked over nothing. The guilt was instantly replaced by a fresh wave of irritation. He had cut his trip short, upset Kendra, and flown for 6 hours, all for a missed appointment. He got into his own waiting car, a sleek Audi A8, and barked directions to his driver. "Nexus building, and step on it." During the drive into the city, he rehearsed his story for Naomi. He would be the hero. He'd heard about the takeover bid and had to come back immediately. He would express profound regret for not being able to tell her before he left, framing it as a selfless act to protect her from stress during the pregnancy. He would shower her with affection, promise her a makeup trip to any destination she desired. He would be so convincing, so loving, so utterly in control that she would never suspect a thing. By the time he was done, she would be apologizing to him for causing him to worry. His phone rang. It was Robert, his COO. "Gideon." "Thank God. What is this about a takeover?" "My phone has been ringing off the hook all morning. I've spoken to our largest shareholders, and no one has heard a thing." "Are you sure your source is reliable?" Gideon's brow furrowed. He had expected Robert to have heard the same rumors he had planted. "Just get the board on a conference line for 3 p.m. We need to present a united front," he blustered, trying to maintain control of the narrative. "The board is already here, Gideon. They're waiting for you in the main conference room. They've been here for an hour." "What, why?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. Robert's voice, when it came back, was strained and formal. "They called the meeting Gideon, not me. They said it was urgent. They said it concerns your leadership." The blood drained from Gideon's face. This was not part of the plan. A board meeting called about him. It made no sense. He had delivered record profits for 10 consecutive quarters. He was the golden boy of fintech. He arrived at the towering glass headquarters of Nexus Capital a few minutes later. The lobby felt different, the usual deference of his employees replaced with nervous, averted glances. As he strode towards the executive elevators, his assistant, a young, perpetually terrified man named Peter, intercepted him. "Mr. Roth." They're waiting in the Olympus room. And, sir, your wife is here." Gideon stopped dead. "Naomi." "Here." Why, Peter swallowed hard. "She's with them, sir, in the conference room. She asked me to give you this when you arrived." Peter handed him a single sealed manila envelope. Gideon's name was written on the front in Naomi's elegant, familiar script. His heart began to hammer against his ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. This was wrong. All of it was terribly, horribly wrong. He tore open the envelope. Inside was not a letter. It was a single, glossy photograph. It was a picture of the villa in Gouverneur, the one he and Kendra had just left. It was taken from a distance with a telephoto lens, but the image was crystal clear. Two figures stood on the terrace, champagne glasses in hand, their heads close together in a conspiratorial toast. Gideon and Kendra. The photo was time-stamped. Yesterday. 4:17 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The carefully constructed walls of his lies crumbled into dust. She knew. While he was basking in the sun, she knew. While he was flying back, panicking about her health, she knew. The doctor's call, the missed appointment. It was all a trap. He looked up from the photo, his eyes wide with a dawning, sickening horror. He was not the predator returning to his den. He was the prey walking blindly into the abattoir. And his quiet, gentle, pregnant wife was the one holding the butcher's knife. The Olympus room was on the 80th floor, a glass-walled sanctuary reserved for the most critical meetings of Nexus Capital. It boasted a panoramic view of New York City, a vista that had always made Gideon feel like a king surveying his domain. Today it felt like he was walking the plank. He pushed open the heavy glass doors and stepped inside. The air was thick with a tense, funereal silence. The entire board of directors was there, 6 men and 2 women who owed their considerable wealth to his vision. They were seated around the massive granite table, their faces grim and unreadable. They did not look at him. Their eyes were all fixed on the person standing at the head of the table in the spot usually reserved for him. It was Naomi. She was wearing a simple but elegant navy blue maternity dress. Her hair was pulled back in a neat chignon, and her expression was one of serene, chilling composure. She looked directly at Gideon, her gaze not fiery with anger, but cold with the detached precision of a surgeon about to make the first incision. Beside her stood her lawyer, Benjamin Carter, his arms crossed, looking like a vulture, ready for a feast. "Gideon, Naomi," said her voice, calm and even, echoing slightly in the silent room. "Thank you for joining us. Please take a seat." She gestured to the single empty chair directly opposite her. It felt less like an invitation and more like a defendant being directed to the stand. He walked to the chair. On legs that felt like lead, the photograph still clutched in his hand. He dropped into the seat, his eyes darting from Naomi to the stone-faced board members. "Naomi, what is this?" He began, trying to inject a tone of bewildered authority into his voice. "What's going on?" Robert said something about a board meeting. "This is not a board meeting, Gideon." Naomi interrupted, her voice cutting through his bluff. "It's an intervention, or perhaps more accurately, a receivership." From a leather portfolio in front of her, she slid a thick, spiral-bound document across the granite table. It stopped directly in front of him. The cover read, "Project Nightingale, an internal audit of the CEO's discretionary accounts." Project Nightingale. he whispered, his mouth suddenly dry. "It's what they call the person who sings." Naomi said, a flicker of something almost pitying in her eyes. "I thought it was appropriate. I suggest you open it." His hands trembled as he opened the report. It was his entire secret life laid bare in spreadsheets, charts, and financial statements. It was all there. The Delaware LLC, Lowell Holdings, the Porsche Cayenne, the wire transfers to the Cayman Islands, the fraudulent consulting fees paid out from Nexus Capital's accounts. It wasn't just evidence of an affair. It was a meticulously documented case of felony embezzlement. Page after page, his crimes were laid out in the cold, irrefutable language of forensic accounting. Naomi had missed nothing. She had tracked every dollar, every secret transaction, every lie. She had even included a projected timeline of his planned sabbatical, cross-referencing it with the liquidation of his stocks and the offshore transfers, presenting it as a clear plan to abscond with company funds. How he breathed, looking up at her, his mind reeling. "How did you? You thought I spent my days planning charity galas and picking out nursery colors, didn't you?" Naomi said, her voice still quiet, yet it filled the entire room. "You forgot who I was before I met you. You saw what you wanted to see, a beautiful, supportive, and slightly naive wife to complete the picture of your perfect life. An asset. You catastrophically misjudged your asset, Gideon." She then turned her attention to the board. For the past 4 months, she announced, her voice gaining strength and authority. "I have been conducting a private investigation into my husband's financial activities, both personal and corporate. What I found was a systematic pattern of fraud and embezzlement totaling over $18 million from Nexus Capital." A collective gasp went through the room. Board member Harold Chen, an old friend of Gideon's father, looked pale. "This report," Naomi continued, gesturing to the copy in front of Gideon, "contains irrefutable proof of every transaction. Bank records, wire confirmations, shell company registrations, and sworn affidavits from the private investigators I employed. Everything you need to remove him for cause is in there." Gideon felt the floor drop out from under him. This wasn't a divorce negotiation. This was a corporate coup. She had him cornered not as a cheating husband, but as a criminal. "Naomi, please," he pleaded, his arrogance shattering, replaced by raw, desperate fear. "We can talk about this, privately. We're long past private conversations." "Gideon," she said. She then delivered the killing blow. "I have, however, prepared a solution that avoids this becoming a public spectacle. Because despite your actions, I have no desire to see the father of my child in prison, or to have the value of this company and my son's future inheritance destroyed by a federal investigation." Benjamin Carter stepped forward, placing a second, much thinner folder on the table. "This is a post-nuptial and severance agreement." The lawyer stated, his voice booming in the silence. "Mr. Roth will resign as CEO and from the board effective immediately. He will plead no contest in our divorce proceedings, citing irreconcilable differences. He will forfeit 75% of his personal assets, including all Nexus stock, to a trust established for his and Naomi's child, Leo Roth. The remaining 25% will be used as restitution to the company to repay the funds he misappropriated. He will cede all rights to the Tribeca penthouse and all other shared properties. In exchange for his full and immediate compliance, the findings of Project Nightingale will be sealed, and this board will agree to frame his departure as a voluntary resignation for personal health reasons. It was a complete and total annihilation. He would be left with nothing. No job, no money, no home. He would be erased. "You can't do this," Gideon stammered, looking around at the board members, searching for an ally. He found none. They stared back at him with the cold eyes of investors who had just seen their life's work threatened by the very man they had trusted to protect it. Naomi picked up a pen from the table. She held it out to him. "You have two options, Gideon," she said, her voice devoid of all emotion. "You can sign this document, walk out of this building with what's left of your dignity, and start over. Or you can refuse, and Mr. Carter will walk these findings over to the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York. The choice is yours. You have 5 minutes." The king was checkmated. The master of the universe had been outmaneuvered. He looked at his wife, truly seeing her for the first time. He saw the brilliant, ruthless strategist. She had always been the woman he had been too arrogant and self-absorbed to ever truly know. And in her eyes, he saw the reflection of his own ruin. The 5 minutes Naomi gave him felt like both an eternity and a split second. Gideon's mind raced through 1,000 possibilities, 1,000 arguments and threats. But they all dissolved against the granite wall of her preparation. Every escape route was blocked. Every countermove had been anticipated. He was trapped in a cage of his own making, and she held the only key which she had no intention of using. He looked at the pen she held out to him. It was a simple black fountain pen. He had given it to her on their first anniversary, a symbol of the life they were supposed to write together. Now it was the instrument of his undoing. With a shaking hand he took the pen. The weight of it felt immense. He flipped to the last page of the agreement, his signature line waiting like an open grave. He could hear the frantic beating of his own heart, the only sound in the suffocating silence of the Olympus room. He signed his name, the name that had once been a hallmark of power and success. The ink looked black like poison on the crisp white page. He had just signed away his entire world. Benjamin Carter took the document, reviewed the signature, and gave Naomi a curt nod. It was done. "A press release announcing your resignation for health reasons will be distributed in 1 hour," Naomi said, her voice now that of a CEO addressing a dismissed employee. "Your corporate accounts and access have already been suspended. A security detail will escort you to your office to collect your personal belongings. You have 15 minutes. After that, they will escort you from the building." She didn't wait for a reply. She turned, and without a single backward glance, walked out of the Olympus room, her lawyer following in her wake. The board members, as if released from a spell, began to murmur amongst themselves, avoiding his gaze. Robert, his COO, and now his successor, gave him a look that was a mixture of pity and contempt. The walk to his office, flanked by 2 stoic security guards, was the longest walk of his life. Employees peered out from their cubicles, whispering. The news was already spreading. The king was being deposed, paraded through his own fallen kingdom. His office, once his sanctuary, felt alien. Naomi had been thorough. His personal laptop was gone. The family photos on his desk were gone. All that remained were the trappings of his job industry awards, deal trophies, a whiteboard covered in now meaningless projections. He numbly packed a few personal effects into a cardboard box, a framed photo of his late father, a couple of books, the pen Naomi had left behind. 15 minutes later, he was standing on the curb outside the Nexus building, holding a small, pathetic box of memories. The city bustled around him, indifferent to his spectacular fall from grace. He had no car, no driver. He was just another man on a New York street. He pulled out his burner phone and dialed Kendra's number. He needed someone a familiar shore in this shipwreck. She answered on the second ring, her voice impatient. "Gideon. Are you done? I'm bored to death in this hotel room and the room service is mediocre." "It's over, Kendra," he said, his voice hollow. "Great. So what's the plan? Are we going back to St. Bart's tonight?" "No, you don't understand," he said, the words catching in his throat. "Everything is gone. The company, the money, the apartment, all of it. She took it all." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. He could practically hear the gears turning in her mind, recalculating, reassessing her investment. "What do you mean she took it all?" Kendra's voice was sharp, stripped of its seductive warmth. "What about the money in the Caymans?" "Our money. It's part of the settlement." "Restitution," he choked out. "It's gone." Another pause, colder and longer than the first. When she finally spoke, her voice was unrecognizable. It was the voice of a creditor calling in a bad debt. "So let me get this straight," she said, her words dripping with venom. "You blew up your life, you brought me along for the ride, and you're walking away with nothing." "You have nothing. He started, but he had no answer. "You are a fool, Gideon," she hissed. "A weak, pathetic fool. Don't ever call me again." The line went dead. He stood there, phone in hand, as the full weight of his isolation crashed down upon him. He had betrayed his loyal, brilliant wife for a woman who had just discarded him like a bad investment the second his stock plummeted. He had traded a priceless treasure for a worthless piece of glass. He had nowhere to go. He couldn't face his parents. His friends were all business associates who would scatter now that he was powerless. He started walking with no destination in mind, just one of the millions of anonymous faces in the urban sprawl, a ghost haunted by the empire he had built and lost in a single day. The silence from Naomi was more damning than any scream could ever be. She hadn't just divorced him, she had deleted him. 6 months later, the city had shed its autumnal colors for the stark, crystalline beauty of winter. The frantic energy of Manhattan felt a world away from the quiet, tree-lined streets of Brooklyn Heights, where Naomi now lived. The Tribeca penthouse, a monument to a life that no longer existed, had been sold. Its cold, minimalist spaces and ghost-filled memories were traded for the warmth of a 4-story brownstone with original moldings and a small, snow-dusted garden out back. The air here smelled of old wood lemon polish and faintly of the baby powder and milk that now defined Naomi's world. Her life was no longer measured by galas and board meetings, but by feeding schedules and the miraculous weight of a sleeping child in her arms. Leo Prescott. Roth had arrived in late November, a healthy 7-pound declaration of the future. He was a perfect fusion of his parents, possessing Gideon's dark, thick hair and expressive brows, but with Naomi's calm, unnervingly perceptive grey eyes. Sometimes, when she looked at him, a pang of the past would echo in her heart, a phantom limb of a life she'd been forced to amputate. But then he would grasp her finger with his tiny, perfect hand, and the ghost would recede, replaced by a love so fierce and absolute it felt like the sun. This was her new empire. Not a glass tower scraping the sky, but the 4 walls of a home filled with light and the soft gurgle of a happy baby. Her days were a peaceful rhythm of domesticity, but her mind remained as sharp as ever. She managed the Leo Roth Trust with the same quiet precision she had used to dismantle Gideon's life. She had weekly calls with Robert Nexus Capital's new CEO. Her input subtle but incisive, guiding the company her son would one day inherit. She had transformed from a silent partner into a silent ruler, her power more profound for being unseen. She was not a woman recovering. She was a woman remade, forged in the fires of betrayal, and stronger for the heat. One crisp December afternoon, she decided to take Leo for a walk. The air was frigid, but the sun was bright, glinting off the icy branches of the trees in the park. Leo was nestled in his stroller, swaddled in a cashmere blanket, his rosy cheeks the only part of him visible beneath a tiny woolen hat. The rhythmic crunch of Naomi's boots on the frosted path was a soothing percussion to the quiet of the day. It was a moment of perfect, earned peace. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. She glanced at the screen, expecting it to be her mother, or perhaps Benjamin Carter with a quarterly update. Instead, the screen showed a blocked, unknown number. Her first instinct was to ignore it, to dismiss it as a telemarketer intruding on her sanctuary. But something, a flicker of intuition, as cold and sharp as the winter air, made her pause. She stopped the stroller by a wrought-iron bench overlooking the East River and answered, her voice neutral. "Hello." A moment of static-filled silence, then a voice hesitant and rough, as if it hadn't been used for some time. "Naomi." Her breath caught in her throat. Her hand tightened on the handle of the stroller. The voice was an echo from a buried life stripped of its familiar timbre of command and arrogance, but it was unmistakably his. It was Gideon. She said nothing, her silence a shield. "Naomi." "Are you there?" he asked, a note of desperation creeping in. She finally found her voice, the words emerging colder than she intended. "What do you want, Gideon?" A ragged exhale on the other end of the line. I heard about the baby." He said the words tumbling out, as if he'd rehearsed them 1,000 times. "I saw a picture. A friend of a friend. They sent it to me. He's beautiful now." The old nickname, once a term of endearment, whispered in the dark, now felt like a trespass, a violation of the new life she had so carefully constructed. "He is," she replied, her voice flat. She looked down at Leo, who stirred slightly in his sleep, his little mouth making a soft, sucking motion. She felt a surge of protectiveness, so intense it was almost painful. I'm in a program," Gideon continued, his voice cracking. "A 12-step thing. For a lot of things. My therapist calls it pathological narcissism, ego, sex addiction. I'm trying to really understand why I did what I did, why I threw away everything." He paused, and she could hear the hollow sound of the room he must be in. "I'm working a job at a hardware store out in Queens, stocking shelves, mixing paint. It's humbling." Naomi imagined it, Gideon Roth, the man who wore $10,000 suits and commanded billion-dollar deals wearing a canvas apron, his hands dusty with spackle. The image should have brought a sense of satisfaction, of schadenfreude. Instead, she felt a profound and weary sadness. The waste of it all. "I know I have no right to ask this," he said, his voice dropping to a raw whisper. "I know I gave up everything. I forfeited my rights. I signed the papers. But I was wondering if maybe someday, far in the future, I could see him. Just once. I don't want anything. I won't ask for money or forgiveness. I just want to see my son. The plea hung in the frozen air between them. Her mind, the forensic accountant's mind, saw it as a negotiation, a first move in a long game to re-enter their lives. Her heart, the mother's heart, heard only the broken plea of a father. She looked across the river at the Manhattan skyline, the glass towers like shards of a distant, painful memory. She had won. She had taken everything from him, just as he had planned to do to her. She had the power, the money, the control. And most importantly, she had their son. She could just say no. She could hang up the phone, block his number, and he would have no recourse. It would be a clean, final act of erasure. But then she looked down at Leo's sleeping face. She saw the shape of Gideon's jaw in the soft curve of her son's, the shadow of his brow over eyes that were all her own. One day, this tiny, innocent being would grow up. He would ask questions. He would have a void in his life in the shape of a father, and that void could fill with anger, with resentment, with a confusion that could poison him. Denying Gideon completely might protect her. But would it truly protect her son? Her entire plan had been about securing Leo's future. What kind of future would it be if it was built on a foundation of her own bitterness, however justified? The final act of her victory, she realized, could not be vengeance. It had to be grace. Leo deserves to know his father, she said, finally, her voice clear and steady, the decision settling within her, solid and sure. But you won't be his father until you become a man he can be proud of. You won't be the man on the cover of Forbes, and you won't be the man who stocks shelves in Queens. You have to become someone new. She could hear him holding his breath on the other end of the line. So keep working your program, she continued, her voice, the sound of steel wrapped in velvet. Stay sober. Find a life that has meaning beyond a balance sheet. Build something real, something that comes from your hands and your heart, not your ego. When you've done that for a long, long time, years, Gideon, you can call me again, and we'll see. It was not a yes. It was not forgiveness. But it was not a no. It was a chance, a sliver of light at the end of a long, dark tunnel of his own creation. It was more than he deserved, and it was a final, quiet testament to the strength of the woman he had so profoundly misunderstood. A choked, ragged sound came through the phone. A sob. "Thank you, Naomi," he whispered the two words, carrying the weight of his entire fallen world. "Thank you." She ended the call without saying goodbye, and slid the phone back into her pocket. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and violet. She adjusted Leo's blanket, shielding him from the wind that swept off the river, and began to walk again. The path ahead was bathed in the golden light of the fading day. She was no longer Naomi Roth, the millionaire's wife, nor was she simply Naomi Prescott, the forensic accountant. She was Naomi, a mother, the architect of a new life, a survivor who had faced the ultimate betrayal and had not only weathered the storm, but had emerged commanding the winds. Her past was settled. Her future and her son's was just beginning. The story of Gideon and Naomi Roth is a chilling reminder that the quietest people in the room are often the most powerful. It's a story about the devastating consequences of arrogance and a testament to the unbreakable strength of a woman who was pushed to the edge and decided to build a new world from the rubble of her old one. Gideon thought he was escaping a gilded cage, only to discover he had been living with a brilliant lioness who knew the value of patience and the art of the perfect trap. His betrayal was loud and reckless. Her response was silent, strategic, and absolute. What would you have done in Naomi's shoes? Could you have maintained such cold, calculated composure in the face of such a deep betrayal? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were captivated by this story of deception and empowerment, please smash that like button. Share this video with someone who loves a good story, and make sure you hit subscribe and ring that notification bell. We have more tales of real-life drama and shocking twists coming your way, and you won't want to miss a single one.